122 missed calls. It's a number that permanently burns into your memory when it's glowing on your phone screen in the dark. 7 voicemails oscillating between breathless, sobbing apologies and vicious, hateful threats. All because I looked my mother in the eye and refused to fund a $93,000 wedding. Here's exactly how it happened. If you want to understand how a family reaches the point of extortion, you have to understand the dynamic that bred it. I'm 34. My sister, Chloe, is 26. There is an 8-year gap between us, but the real gap is how we were raised in the exact same house. I grew up when my parents were struggling. I wore hand-me-downs from older cousins, got a job at a grocery store the day I turned 16, and paid my own way through state college by working nights as a dispatcher. By the time Chloe came along, my father had gotten a promotion, and my mother had perfected the art of spending money before it cleared the bank. Chloe never had a part-time job. She had a debit card linked to an account she didn't fund. I work in commercial logistics now. It's not glamorous, but managing supply chains pays well. I bought a modest townhouse. I invest, and I live quietly. My family, however, always viewed my financial stability as a communal emergency fund. A $400 brake repair for Dad here, $1,200 to cover Mom's miscalculated property tax there. It was always a loan, and it was never paid back. But nothing prepared me for the Tuesday night dinner at my parents' house. My mother, Brenda, hates cooking. So, when she invited me over for a homemade pot roast on a random weekday, my defenses were instantly up. I walked through the front door of my childhood home, smelling the heavy, savory scent of beef and roasted carrots, and immediately noticed the dining table. It was cleared of the usual clutter of junk mail and catalogs. In the center sat Chloe, glowing, twisting a massive, frankly gaudy diamond ring on her left hand. Next to her sat a massive, white leather binder with gold-embossed initials, C and D. Her fiancé, David, wasn't there. He rarely was when the family had business to discuss. "Surprise!" Chloe squealed, holding up her hand. I smiled, setting my purse on a chair. "Congratulations, Chloe. I knew it was coming, but the ring is significant." "David financed it," my mother said proudly, bustling in from the kitchen with a serving platter. 36 months, 0 interest if they pay it off early. But that's not why we asked you here. We sat. We ate the pot roast. The conversation felt incredibly rehearsed. My mother asked about my job, something she hadn't done in 2 years, and praised my recent promotion. Chloe complimented my blouse. It felt like sitting across from 2 timeshare salespeople who were just waiting for the right moment to lock me in a room. As soon as the plates were cleared, Chloe dragged the heavy white binder across the wood table. It made a dull, thudding sound. "So, we're finalizing the wedding plans," Chloe said, flipping open the cover. The pages were meticulously organized with color-coded tabs. "We want an autumn wedding, specifically at the Biltmore estate." I raised an eyebrow. "The Biltmore? In North Carolina? That's a destination wedding for 150 people." "It's my dream," Chloe said, her voice adopting that slight, breathy pitch she used when she wanted Dad to buy her something. "And we have it all budgeted out. Look." She turned the binder toward me. It was an Excel spreadsheet printed on heavy stock paper. I started scanning the lines. Venue rental, $15,000. Catering and premium open bar, $28,000. Custom imported florals, $12,000. Photography and videography team, $8,500. A designer gown, plus an evening reception dress, $11,000. My eyes jumped to the bottom right corner. The total cell was highlighted in pale pink. $93,450. I let out a short, sharp breath that was almost a laugh. Wow, 93,000. "Chloe, you work as a part-time receptionist at a yoga studio, and David is an assistant manager at a gym. How are you paying for this?" Silence fell over the table, the kind of thick, suffocating silence that precedes a car crash. My mother wiped her mouth with a napkin, folded it neatly, and looked at me with a completely flat expression. "We aren't," my mother said. "You are." I stared at her. I waited for the punchline, but my mother's eyes were dead serious. Chloe looked down at her hands, suddenly very interested in her cuticles. "Excuse me?" I said, keeping my voice low and even. "You're the only one in the family with real money, Rachel," my mother said, leaning forward. Your father and I are tapped out. The mortgage is underwater, and we maxed out our cards helping Chloe with her apartment deposit last year. You make six figures. You don't have kids. You don't even have a boyfriend. You have more than enough in savings to cover this. I felt the blood rushing in my ears. The sheer audacity of the math they had done in their heads, calculating my worth based on my marital status and my lack of children. My savings, I said, articulating every word, are for my retirement and for emergencies, not for $100,000 party. It's not a party, it's her wedding, my mother snapped, her voice rising. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. You're her sister. You're supposed to step up. What else are you hoarding that money for? Another boring vacation by yourself? I looked at Chloe. You agreed to this? You planned a $93,000 wedding under the assumption that you would just hand me the bill? Chloe's lower lip trembled. It was a practiced move. David's family has money, Rachel. They're expecting a certain standard. If we just do a cheap backyard thing, they'll judge me. I just want one perfect day. Is that so much to ask? You have the money sitting there doing nothing. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, I said, closing the white leather binder and pushing it back across the table. It's keeping me secure so I never end up in a position where I have to beg relatives to fund a lifestyle I can't afford. The answer is no. The word no echoed in the dining room. I had said no to them before, usually over smaller things, like refusing to co-sign a car loan for Chloe 3 years ago, but this time, the rejection hit the table like a live grenade. Chloe instantly burst into tears. She didn't cover her face. She just let the tears stream down her cheeks while she looked at our mother, a silent demand for someone to fix this. My mother stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the hardwood floor. You selfish, arrogant brat, she hissed, her face flushing a deep, mottled red. After everything we've done for you, after everything this family has given you, what have you given me exactly? I asked, my voice remaining unnervingly calm. I could feel my hands shaking, so I kept them flat on my lap beneath the table. I paid my own way through school. I paid my own rent from the day I turned 18. The only thing you've given me in the last 10 years is an open palm. We gave you life, my mother screamed. We gave you a home. You wouldn't have that fancy corporate job if we hadn't raised you with a strong work ethic. You raised me with a fear of poverty, I corrected her. There's a difference. I told you she'd do this, Chloe sobbed, burying her face in her hands now. I told you she hated me. She's always been jealous of me. Jealous? I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Chloe, you're 26 years old, 30 grand in credit card debt, and marrying a man who financed your engagement ring. I'm not jealous. I'm exhausted. I stood up and walked over to the armchair where I had left my purse. I slung the strap over my shoulder and picked up my coat. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to have a screaming match that the neighbors could hear. I just wanted to leave. My mother moved quickly, stepping into the hallway to block the front door. She crossed her arms. Her eyes were narrowed, completely stripped of any maternal warmth. In that moment, I wasn't her daughter. I was a bank vault, refusing to open. You listen to me, Rachel, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous quiet register. You are going to open your checkbook, and you are going to pay the deposit for the Biltmore by Friday. It's $15,000. If you walk out that door without agreeing to pay for your sister's wedding, you are no longer part of this family. I stopped. I looked at her. I looked past her into the dining room, where Chloe was peeking through her fingers, waiting to see if the threat would break me. This was the card they always played when they were backed into a corner. Family. It was supposed to be a sacred word, a tether that kept me bound to their dysfunction. They expected me to crumble, to apologize, to write the check just to keep the peace. But as I stood there looking at my mother's hard, unforgiving face, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel the familiar panic of abandonment. I felt relief. A massive, heavy weight simply evaporated from my shoulders. The ultimatum wasn't a threat. It was an exit visa. Okay, I said. My mother blinked. Her arms dropped a fraction of an inch. What? Okay, I repeated, stepping toward the door. If the price of admission to this family is $93,000, I can't afford it. Have a good life, Mom. Good luck with the wedding, Chloe. I reached past my mother, turned the deadbolt, and opened the door. The cool night air hit my face, smelling like wet asphalt and cut grass. I walked to my car, got in, and started the engine. I didn't look back at the house as I pulled out of the driveway. I drove for 20 minutes in total silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I just gripped the steering wheel, my heart pounding a steady, rhythmic drumbeat in my chest. I had actually done it. I had cut the cord. Then, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. The screen lit up. "Mom!" I ignored it. It stopped. 30 seconds later, it buzzed again. "Chloe." I let it ring out. By the time I pulled into my townhouse complex, I had 7 missed calls. I put my phone on silent, walked inside, locked the door, and poured myself a glass of water. I sat on my couch in the dark, watching the screen light up over and over again. That first night, the calls were angry. My voicemail filled up with my mother screaming about how I was dead to her, how I had destroyed Chloe's future, how I was a sociopath. I didn't delete them. I just listened to them, letting the venom wash over me, solidifying my decision. But the anger didn't last. By Thursday, reality started to set in for them. The Biltmore required the $15,000 deposit by Friday to secure the autumn date. Chloe had already sent out save-the-date emails to David's wealthy family based on a venue she hadn't booked. The panic set in. On Friday morning, my phone showed 4 missed calls over a 7-2-hour period. The voicemails shifted. My mother's voice went from a screech to a pathetic, wavering plea. "Rachel, please pick up. Chloe hasn't stopped crying." David's mother called asking about hotel blocks. "We can't lose this venue. Just pay the deposit." "You don't have to pay for the whole thing, just the deposit. We'll pay you back, I promise. Please, just wire the money." I knew the promise was a lie. If I paid the $15,000, they would lock me into the contract. When the $28,000 catering bill came due, they'd default, and the vendors would come after me because my name would be on the paperwork. It was a trap, plain and simple. I went to work. I sat in meetings. I drank coffee, and my phone kept vibrating. By Sunday evening, the total number of missed calls hit 122. Texts flooded in from numbers I didn't recognize, aunts, uncles, and cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years, suddenly sending me paragraphs about forgiveness and blood being thicker than water. My mother had clearly deployed her flying monkeys, spinning a narrative where I had maliciously backed out of a promise to ruin Chloe's big day. It was absolute madness. But what they didn't realize was that every single call, every single manipulative text, only proved that leaving the house that Tuesday night was the best financial and emotional decision I had ever made. On Monday morning, I walked into my office building, sat at my desk, and systematically blocked the phone numbers of my mother, my father, my sister, and every relative who had sent me a text over the weekend. I work in commercial logistics. My entire career is built on identifying inefficiencies, mitigating risks, and cutting off failing supply chains. I decided to apply my professional skill set to my personal life. By Tuesday, the silence on my personal cell phone was absolute. It was peaceful. But I knew my family well enough to know they wouldn't just accept defeat. If they couldn't reach me through the front door, they would look for a window. That window arrived on Wednesday at 12:15 p.m. in the form of a call on my direct office extension. "Rachel," a voice said. It was Arthur, my father. I paused, my fingers hovering over my keyboard. My father rarely spoke during family conflicts. He was the perpetual passenger in my mother's chaotic vehicle, keeping his head down and agreeing to whatever kept her temper from aiming at him. "Dad, how did you get this number?" "I found an old business card in the kitchen drawer," he said. He sounded tired. His voice had the dry, raspy quality of a man who hadn't slept well. "Rachel, you need to call your mother. She's making everyone miserable." The venue called. The deposit deadline passed. They gave the October date to another couple. "I told her I wasn't paying," I said, keeping my tone flat. "The deadline passing is a natural consequence of not having $15,000. "You don't understand," he sighed. "Chloe already sent out the save the dates to David's family. David's parents are asking about booking their flights. Chloe is having a breakdown in her childhood bedroom. Just fix this. You have the money. I'll pay you back. 10% of my paycheck every month. We'll draft a contract. Dad, you still owe me $1,200 for your property taxes from 2 years ago. I'm not funding this." "You're being cruel, Rachel." "I'm being solvent," I replied. "Do not call my office again." I hung up the phone and stared at the blinking red light on the receiver. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought losing the venue would force them to face reality, scale down the wedding, and move on. I underestimated the sheer depth of the lies Chloe had told to keep her facade intact. The real confrontation didn't happen with my parents. It happened on Thursday afternoon, right in the lobby of my office building. I had just come down from the elevators to grab a coffee from the ground floor cafe when I saw him. David. He was standing near the security desk, wearing his blue gym polo, shifting his weight nervously from foot to foot. When he spotted me, he walked over quickly. He didn't look angry. He looked entirely panicked. "Rachel," he said, holding his hands up slightly as if to show he wasn't there to fight. "I know you blocked Chloe's number. I need 5 minutes. Please." I assessed him. David was 28, a genuinely nice guy who worked hard at his gym management job. He wasn't a grifter. He was just a guy who had walked into a minefield without a map. 5 minutes, I agreed, pointing toward a small seating area in the corner of the lobby, far away from the foot traffic. We sat down in the leather chairs. "What do you want, David?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I just need to know why you backed out. Chloe is a wreck. She told me you promised her this wedding as a graduation gift when she finished college, and that you suddenly changed your mind because you didn't approve of me. If this is about me not making enough money, I swear I'm up for a regional manager position next year. I can pay you back for the Biltmore." I stared at him. The sheer audacity of the narrative my sister had spun was staggering. She hadn't just expected me to pay. She had proactively spent the money in her head and built a fictional history to justify it to her fiancé. "David," I said slowly, "what exactly do you think my financial arrangement with my family is?" He blinked, confused by the question. "Chloe told me you had a trust fund from your grandparents, and that you made a deal with her that you'd cover the wedding since she didn't get a share of the inheritance." I let out a slow, sharp breath. My grandparents were a mechanic and a lunch lady. They died with $6,000 in a joint checking account, which went to paying for their funerals. There is no trust fund. I work 50 hours a week managing freight routes. That is my only income. David's brow furrowed. But the wedding budget. Chloe said her parents were covering the dress and the florist, and you were handling the venue and catering. I uncrossed my legs, leaned forward, and looked him dead in the eye. "David, last Tuesday, I was invited to a dinner." Chloe pushed a white binder across the table with a $93,000 spreadsheet. "My mother looked at me and demanded I pay for the entire thing because I have savings and I don't have children. I said no. They told me if I didn't pay, I was out of the family. I walked out. That is the truth. Every single cent of that wedding was completely unfunded." The blood drained from David's face. He looked physically ill. "93,000? He whispered. "She told me the whole thing was capped at 40, and it was already paid for. I took out a high-interest loan to buy that ring because she told me her family was accustomed to a certain standard. She said her parents were wealthy. My parents are drowning in debt," I corrected him. "They took out a second mortgage 3 years ago. Chloe has $30,000 in credit card debt. Did she tell you that?" David sat back in his chair, staring blankly at the marble floor of the lobby. The illusion was evaporating in real time. I watched his posture collapse. He was a man realizing he was legally binding himself to a financial black hole. "You have a supply chain problem, David," I said quietly. "Your partner is feeding you fraudulent data. Do not marry into this without a prenuptial agreement and a credit check." He didn't argue. He didn't defend her. He just stood up, nodded at me, and walked out of the glass doors. The implosion of Chloe and David's relationship took exactly 4 days. I didn't have to witness the screaming matches, the tears, or the desperate backpedaling. The truth is clinical. Once the numbers are on the table, you can't gaslight your way out of them. David demanded to see Chloe's credit card statements. When she refused, he called his parents and told them the wedding was off. He moved out of their shared apartment that weekend, and he took the diamond ring with him. The fallout hit my parents' house like a wrecking ball. Without a wealthy family to impress, and without my bank account to drain, the facade my mother had spent decades building finally cracked. 2 weeks after the engagement was broken, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. It was from my mother. It wasn't an apology. It was a vicious, 3-page manifesto blaming me for destroying her family. She wrote that my jealousy over Chloe finding love had driven me to sabotage the relationship by filling David's head with lies. She formally informed me that I was no longer her daughter and that I was forbidden from attending their funerals. I read the letter standing at my kitchen island. I didn't cry. I didn't feel a sudden rush of guilt. I took a red pen from a drawer, wrote "Return to sender" on the envelope, and dropped it in the outgoing mail slot the next morning. Over the next 6 months, the consequences of their financial reality caught up with them. I heard through a distant cousin that my parents were forced to sell my childhood home. They couldn't keep up with the second mortgage payments, and the equity they had squeezed out of the property was long gone. They downsized to a small, two-bedroom apartment in a neighboring town. Chloe had to move in with them. Without David splitting the rent on her apartment, and with her yoga studio income entirely consumed by her minimum credit card payments, she had nowhere else to go. They got exactly what they had always created: a shared life built on debt, resentment, and a desperate need to keep up appearances, confined to 800 square feet. Meanwhile, my life expanded. The energy I used to spend anticipating my mother's next financial emergency was suddenly mine to keep. I didn't realize how much of a mental toll their extortion had taken on me until it was gone. It was like carrying a 50-pound backpack for 10 years and finally taking it off. I slept better. My focus at work sharpened. At the end of the fiscal year, I negotiated a massive promotion to Regional Director of Operations. When my bonus cleared, I didn't buy a gaudy ring, and I didn't book a venue I couldn't afford. I fully funded my retirement accounts for the year, and I bought myself a ticket to Japan. I spent 3 weeks walking through Kyoto, eating incredible food, and enjoying the absolute, profound silence of my phone not ringing. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. They ask if I miss my sister, or if I feel guilty about my parents losing the house. Society conditions us to believe that family is an unconditional contract, regardless of the terms. But I understand contracts. A contract requires mutual consideration, respect, and shared value. What my family offered wasn't a relationship, it was a shakedown. My mother didn't love me for who I was. She loved me for what I could subsidize. My sister didn't view me as a sibling. She viewed me as an ATM. Cutting them off wasn't a malicious act. It was an act of survival. I chose myself over their dysfunction, and it was the most profitable decision I have ever made. 122 missed calls couldn't break me. A $93,000 ultimatum didn't intimidate me. I just looked at the math, closed the binder, and walked away, and I haven't looked back since. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Setting boundaries with family is one of the hardest things a person can do, especially when money and expectations are involved. But protecting your own peace and future is always worth it. If you related to this story or found yourself cheering for the exit, please hit the like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more deeply human, real-life stories every single week. See you in the next one.